The YNW Melly trial finally came to a close, and the ending was not what anybody expected. It was a case of mistrial because the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision, and Melly finally broke his silence after he was released from jail. Back in October 2018, things got real crazy with YNW Melly and his crew. They were just having a good time at the recording studio, living it up, not expecting the tragedy that was about to hit them like a freight train. After leaving the studio, things took a dark turn when YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser got shot and lost their lives. It was a total shocker for everyone involved. YNW Portland had to deal with the aftermath, rushing their lifeless bodies to the hospital, claiming it was a drive-by shooting down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But as you know how it goes, the truth always seems to make its way out. The authorities weren't letting this slide, and they slapped them both with first-degree murder charges for Sack and Juvie, turning into one of those big old legal messes that you couldn't just brush aside. Then on February 13th, 2019, they got busted and thrown right into jail. Throughout this whole legal drama, Melly kept shouting from the rooftops that he was innocent, sticking to a not guilty plea. That's when the roller coaster ride of justice began, full of uncertainty, trying to figure out what really went down that night. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, YNW Melly's trial finally kicked off a little over a month ago. Can you believe it took the state 5 whole years to build their case? Then everything unfolded in the courtroom, and the stakes were sky high as Melly's whole future hung in the balance. The state meant business, going all out and seeking the death penalty. Right from the get-go of the trial, they hit Melly hard with some serious evidence. You won't believe it, but they had surveillance footage showing him, Portland, and the victims all together in a car during the supposed crime. It was like a slam dunk, and they didn't stop there, man. Phone data, blood splatter analysis, and even a bullet casing found in the car just kept piling up more and more evidence against it. There's more to the story, though. Things got a bit shaky when audio recordings of YNW Portland talking to a detective didn't quite match up with their drive-by story. The detective noticed some location discrepancies and made the whole thing look pretty fishy. Then the crime scene investigator stepped in, talking about searching the car used in the supposed drive-by, but the defense wasn't having any of that. They grilled those investigators about fingerprint visibility and why they didn't test all items for DNA. They were really putting up a fight for old Melly. Melly caught a bit of luck when one investigator messed up while handling some of this evidence, and then that raised doubts about the credibility of other findings that they made. But Melly's strongest card was the absence of the murder weapon. That was his defense. He was like, "Show me the proof." And his team played it cool, knowing that without solid evidence, they had a shot. Then they brought in the first witness, Felicia Holmes. Poor lady got dragged into this whole mess just because her daughter was dating Melly at the time of the incident. The defense tried to twist her statements up, saying that she lied to the authorities, but you know what? It did not lead to a mistrial like they were wanting it to. Felicia stuck by Melly's side, and that was definitely a win for his defense team. The second week of the trial was off the charts. Excitement all around as they dropped some seriously hard evidence on us. This FBI agent, Brendan Collins, he took the stage, and it was all about that cell phone evidence. He analyzed phones connected to Melly and one of the victims, and the prosecutor was like, "Bam! Look at this data. Melly was practically right next to the victims before the incident." But you know how it goes, the defense had their own little spin on things. Can we really trust this location data? And who's to say Melly was the only one using that phone? They didn't stop there either. They even questioned the DNA analysis. The prosecution had the evidence though. They claimed it proved Melly was inside the car during the shooting. But the defense pointed out that Melly's DNA didn't match other stuff they examined, basically poking some holes in this whole idea that he was directly involved in the crime. And then the prosecutor brought up Melly's affiliation with the Bloods. Yeah, they tried to link it with the G-Shine Bloods gang with all these social media posts, videos, and references in his songs. But the defense fought back, saying it's all just an online persona, nothing legit. That was not the end of it though. The prosecution tried to pile on even more charges, pushing this whole double homicide as a gang-related hit. The judge shut that shit down. The third week of the trial kicked off with a bang, and everyone was on the edge of their seats. They brought in this super sharp analyst, and man, what they revealed was mind-blowing. YNW Juvie's postpartum checkup showed an injury on his left cheek, and it had these tiny little gunshot residue marks. It was like a big whoa moment. And then this shooting expert stepped up and dropped some serious knowledge on us. They reconstructed this whole scene and explained how they traced the shot's origin and path. Super important for the whole trial, those shots weren't fired from some random car passing by. They were actually coming from the back seat on the driver's side. Not good if you're Melly. The crucial moment in this trial was when Portland spilled the beans to the cops on the night Sack and Juvie got murked. In his statement, he was being super shady, and it definitely didn't work out the way he and Melly were hoping for. He choked when it came to coming up with a solid alibi for the both.
I kind of think I know what happened because I got information that something else happened on the east side of the city in Pembroke Parks, but, which sounds similar to your thing, But you need to tell it. You need to be straight up with us.
Bortland was going on about that crazy night, claiming they were innocent victims of a drive-by shooting right after leaving the studio. But the investigators weren't buying a single bit of it. They started poking holes in Bortland's story, making them seriously question if they were telling the truth or not. You could practically hear the nervousness in Bortland's voice during that chat with the Popos. Some of his claims just didn't add up, and they weren't buying it at all. They were starting to press him about the location of that supposed shooting, trying to get the bottom of things, man. And let me tell you, Bortland got all vague and evasive when the cops were asking about motives and conflicts. He brought up some social media drama and beef with certain people, but he wasn't even giving them straight answers. The biggest slip-up Bortland made, he said he didn't have a phone on him. Like, seriously? Talking about social media stuff, but no phone? That had the cops scratching their heads big time. Bortland wasn't exactly being cooperative with the boys in blue, and to make these even worse, he was just straight up lying to him. His story kept changing, and that just made the investigators even more frustrated with him. They made it very crystal clear that solving the murder of his buddies was their top priority. All that other legal stuff was just secondary. They practically begged him to be honest with them, but he just kept dodging their questions, making their job a real headache. That recording paints a messy and suspicious picture. Bortland was acting all sneaky, and his answers are all over the place, leaving the cops scratching their noggins about what's really going on here. No doubt about it, that's going to come back and bite him when his trial starts later this year. Detective Mark Moretti took the spotlight and spilled all the beans, breaking down the case in meticulous detail with everyone's eyes glued to the phones and the locations of those phones during the shooting. Prosecution was all about linking Melly to the car where the supposed crime happened, and they had some fresh info to back their claim. But here's the old twist. The accuracy of those phone tower records came under question. People started wondering if they could really pinpoint Melly's exact location when he supposedly used that phone. And guess what? The defense saw this as the perfect opportunity to challenge the credibility of that data. Detective Moretti expanded on the locations of Melly and his crew's phones that crucial time. They analyzed how close the phones were to the shell casings and other crucial evidence, and those call records played a big role in the unfolding story. And guess whose name popped up during this conversation? None other than your boy, Fredo Bang. Yeah, you can imagine how that raised some eyebrows about his involvement with Melly right before and after the murders. And then there's Sack's producer, Trayvon Glass, who also spilled some beans, adding more layer on this whole unfolding drama. Man, this courtroom must have been buzzing with some intrigue and tension. Sack's producer gave out some juicy info about the night when the double homicide happened. The surveillance video caught Melly, the victims, Fredo Bang, and a whole crew of other people piling into two cars. One, a Jeep Compass, and two, a red Mitsubishi. The prosecution was all over Fredo. They wanted him to testify, but Fredo wasn't going to have any of that. He kept his mouth shut and stuck to the pleading that fifth. And after the studio session, Glass and his crew rolled with Melly to his place and then swung by Fredo's spot to mourn their friend's loss. But here's where things get a little wild. Glass noticed something a little weird. Melly changed his clothes after that recording session earlier that night. In the courtroom, Glass played it cool, keeping his lips sealed and not giving away any important details when asked about what went down at Fredo's. He just said he was overwhelmed with grief, and that kept him quiet. But you know how it goes. One little thing slipped out, and that was that Melly changed his clothes from the time that they left the studio until they met up again later. The prosecutor jumped on that piece of info like a hawk.
Was Melly wearing the same clothes or different clothes than when you saw him at the studio?
It was a new day. Nah, he wasn't.
Nah, he wasn't. You guys
Wasn't wearing the same clothes.
Okay. Do you recall what he was wearing?
Just had on some shorts.
Everyone in that courtroom had the same big question on their minds. Why on earth did Melly and Bortland change their clothes and cruise around for nearly 40 minutes instead of rushing to the hospital to check on their injured friends? Just does not make sense, man. Innocent folks would not act like that. Let's be honest. Nobody could wrap their heads around all this, and it left everyone feeling uncertain and full of doubt. Their moves were all over the place, and it's just plain confusing. Whatever they were up to that night, it's looking hella suspicious, and their story ain't adding up much. In the very last moments of the trial, the defense called Adrian Davis to the witness stand, hoping to provide an alibi for Melly. Adrian spilled some important details that could help Melly's case. First off, he testified that Melly was in the red Mitsubishi, not the gray Jeep Compass. Secondly, Melly was at home when the gang received the news about Sack and Juby's death. And lastly, he mentioned that Melly was searching for his phone because it wasn't on him. During the defense attorney's questioning, Adrian simply confirmed these points with a yes. But when the prosecutor got a chance to question him, she revealed that he had given different statements a few years prior. He tried to play it off, claiming that he couldn't remember what he had said before, and it turned into a real-life game of he said, she said.
Have you ever answered that question differently?
I don't think so.
If I were to show you your statement from May 5th of 2022, would that help you in answering if you'd ever said something different than what you just testified in court?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, approaching with page 33 of the statement, counsel.
Adrian's statements during the trial raised some eyebrows, and he said some pretty unusual things, like not remembering any of his phone numbers and how everyone in the group regularly used each other's phones. It all sounded a little bit suspicious. And then he went on the "I was intoxicated" card, saying he couldn't remember much from that day. However, when the defense attorney questioned him, he suddenly seemed to remember everything quite clearly, which cast doubt on his credibility. The prosecutor went all out trying to paint him as a liar. If Adrian's not trustworthy, then Melly's alleged alibi loses that strength. Honestly, it felt like a desperate move from the defense, and people don't think that it's going to do much help in Melly's case. The general opinion doesn't seem to lean in Melly's favor. The tension in the courtroom is mounting as everyone tries to unravel what truly happened that night. And at that point, it was up to the jury to make up their minds. They will ultimately decide Melly's fate. After all the testimonies and courtroom drama, it's going to come down to what they believe and how they interpret the evidence. Finally, for the first time in the trial, Melly was asked if he wanted to take the stand and testify in his own defense. And without hesitation, Melly made it crystal clear that he had no intentions of testifying. He's keeping it real and sticking to his decision.
What is your decision?
I will not be testifying.
You will not be testifying.
No, sir.
Is anyone forcing you or coercing you to make this decision?
No, sir.
Anybody make any promises or on the contrary, make any threats to get you not to testify?
No, sir.
This is your free and voluntary decision?
Yes, sir.
The judge made a decision that once the jury starts thinking about the verdict, they can't leave their hotel. It's like they're being held hostage until they reach that final decision. Now, it's clear that Melly's defense is pulling out all the stops to make it seem like he was never in the car where his friends were murked. They want to show that Melly wasn't even present at all, which will pretty much undermine all the hard work the prosecutor did to prove how Sack and Juvie were murked. If Melly wasn't there, then someone else must be responsible. The defense is going all in on this angle.
We are still unable to reach a unanimous decision. So at this time, what I am going to do is just declare a mistrial and indicate to you that how much we appreciate the fact that you were here and willing to serve. One thing I try to tell jurors at the beginning of the trial process, all through voir dire, is how much we appreciate the fact that they're here and willing to serve.
Melly's trial just wrapped up, and the whole shebang that went on for weeks in court is basically left without a decision. The jury couldn't agree on a verdict, so the judge, John Murphy, called it a mistrial. But this doesn't mean that the trial is over yet and that Melly is a free man. These prosecutors are planning to give it another shot with a fresh, new jury. It's only a matter of time before these guys are back in the courtroom again, and they'll try to do a better job next time around. This was some serious stuff for YNW Melly, and he was looking at the death penalty. That's some heavy stuff to deal with, and it's better to take all things into consideration when making this kind of decision than rush to it. One comment said, "You can't convict someone because you think he did it. It must be proven without reasonable doubt." The prosecution didn't do that. There wasn't enough evidence like we've all been saying this whole time. During this trial, the jury took their sweet ass time, and on Friday, they're like, nah, can't decide. But they were told to keep talking and figure it out. And even on Saturday, they were still stuck. So the judge just had to throw in the towel and call it a mistrial. Dozens of people made their opinions clear on the fact that this trial is going to start all over again soon. First off, Melly's manager, 100K Track, spoke up about Melly's case and Melly possibly being released from jail. He believes that Melly might even get out on house arrest before he's expected to show up in court for the new trial. At this point, nobody knows how likely that is to happen, but his defense can definitely try and see where it takes him. This is what Track had to say.
I mean, I'm happy with it, you know what I'm saying? It's not the verdict we would want, of course, but, you know, it's a second chance, and I take that literal for everything. Second chance at life, second chance for a better defense, so, you know, I'm excited. Really feel like Melly's coming home. Ben felt like that, but it's just, you know, confirmed it.
Melly's attorneys, on the other hand, were not as happy as Track. If you ask them, this whole thing should have ended right here and now. They wanted a verdict that they wanted to see Melly acquitted on all counts and standing right there next to him.
Obviously, we want to thank the jury for their great efforts that they've extended over this period of time. But we are somewhat disappointed that Melly is not walking out the door with us.
People online gave their 2 cents too. One comment wrote, "Whether it be guilt or innocence, both sides feel so passionately that it's no surprise it was a hung jury. It wouldn't surprise me that if the next one is too." You could tell the poor judge was hoping this trial would be over. Matter of fact, neither side looked too happy. My heart goes out to the families on both sides. Now we just have to wait and see what happens next. Most likely, in about 3 months or so, we'll be back in the courtroom, and then we'll see if Melly's gonna get the death penalty or not then. This case is far from over. But what y'all think? Do you think it's fair that Melly's case will start all over again? Will he be served justice the second time around? Let us know what you think down in the comments section below. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button, subscribe to the channel, share it with a friend or two, and as always, remember to keep it RIZZLE.